Hey everyone, in this video let's look at the definition of economic growth. Economic growth means an increase in standard of living of the people of the world. So this economic growth started with the Industrial Revolution. That was the first stop of 1800s that started in Great Britain, and after that it spread to US, Germany, and all over the world. So by Industrial Revolution we mean we had widespread use of power-driven machinery, equipments, and we had some social and economic changes. Now, if I look into this definition of economic growth here, this definition is telling me economic growth is an expansion of the production possibilities and an increase in real gross domestic product. So if I look into this slide here, by economic growth we mean we have a rightward shift of the production possibility frontier from 100 to 200. Or we can have an increase in full employment gross domestic product or increase in potential gross domestic product. Now this slide we are looking into the growth rate of real gross domestic product. This is pretty much straightforward here. I just wrote the formula is just written down here. This is equal to real GDP in the current year, which is 8.4. From that we take off the real GDP in the previous year, which is 8. This is over the real GDP in the previous year, which is 8, times 100. So we have the growth of real GDP is equal to 5%. Now I am going to look into the growth rate of real GDP per person. So real GDP per person is equal to real GDP over population. So if I look into this trading economics data, the other way they defined real GDP per person is real GDP per capita. Now let's look into a bunch of other numbers. So I have this real GDP data from the current year, which is 8.4. This is the current year. The real GDP is 8.4 and the population in the current year is equal to 202. So real GDP per person is equal to 8.4 trillion over 202 million, and we get 41,584. Now we also have the previous year's data, and the previous year's data, if we look into that, the real GDP was 8 trillion, population 200. So to find out the real GDP per person, what we did was 8 trillion over 200 million, and we have 40,000. So what we have here is the real GDP per person for the current year and the real GDP per person for the previous year. Now I'm going to look into the growth rate of real GDP per person. So whenever you are finding out the growth rates, the way you are going to do is new value, from that you subtract the old value, divide by the old value, multiply the whole thing in brackets times 100. Looks like the growth rate of real GDP per person is equal to 4%. There is basically another easy way of doing this, and let's look into that. So, what's the growth rate of population? The previous year was 200. The current year or the new value is 202 over the previous year, which is equal to 200. So the growth rate of population, after the calculation, we found our number to be 1%. Now look at the growth rate of real GDP per person. This is equal to the growth rate of real gross domestic product, and from that we subtract the growth rate of population. So let me just point this out. What we are trying to find out is the growth rate of real GDP per person. This is equal to the growth rate of real gross domestic product. From that we subtract the population growth rate or the growth rate of population. So in our example, the growth rate of real gross domestic product exceeds the growth rate of population. So we are going to have some positive number here, and this is equal to 4%. Whenever we have a positive number for growth rate of real GDP per person, we would say we have modern economic growth and or growth has occurred for this nation. So we want the growth rate of population to be less than the growth rate of real gross domestic product. So that's all with the definition. Thank you very much.